Hello and welcome. The panel topic today is early stage funding for K-12 schools. What we'll learn about is finding the on-ramp for early stage funding and getting on the path to a sustainable, affordable facility. What we'll learn from our panelists is that getting on that path can lead to financial flexibility, which often can translate into real resources back into the classroom. My back of the envelope between $500,000 to $1 million annually. And we'll do the discussion for 40 minutes, the Q&A, and then we'll end with each of the panelists giving us a takeaway or a call to action from their work with facilities. I am proud to share the stage with school leaders and a mission-aligned lender. We have Roblin Webb of Freedom Prep with schools in Tennessee and Alabama. Kathryn McHugh of Civic Builders, who is manager for Facilities Investment Fund. Kimberly Neal, who is with Believe Schools, with schools in Indiana and Missouri. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Nguyen Huynh. I'm a senior advisor with the education team at Walton Family Foundation. Let's do some introductions, maybe a little bit about your background and also your education facilities experience. Starting with you, Kimberly.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kimberly Neal Branham. I am the proud leader and founder of Believe Schools. Prior to launching Believe Schools, I worked at KIB DC and I worked at the Noble Network of Charter Schools in Chicago. Prior to that, I was a teacher and a school social worker. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to come and talk to you guys because I've seen the ebbs and flows of funding from working in the bigger charter networks in our country, where we had large teams of support, to now running a small network of charter schools where things just look different. It's a very different experience. So grateful to be here to speak with you guys today and excited to answer any questions you may have.
Hi, I'm Kathryn McHugh. I am the Chief Lending and Investment Officer for Civic Builders. They're a national nonprofit that lends funds to charter schools and also works as a developer, helping schools develop their projects. I have been a community development mission-aligned lender for 30 years. I hate to say it out loud, but it's true. I started out not knowing much about facility lending, but having learned a lot about it. Prior to that, I also was a social worker, some themes here, and I've known these two school leaders for a number of years. We've been catching up and have worked with them on both of their projects in both of their states. So it's been really exciting to work with them.
Right, I'm Roblin Webb, founder and CEO of Freedom Prep Charter Schools. I was not a social worker. I was actually an attorney. I call myself an attorney by training, but an educator by passion. I practiced law for a few years, actually did education law for the Memphis City School District, and then I did the Building Excellent Schools Fellowship and founded the first Freedom Prep School in the fall of 2009 in Memphis with about 100 sixth graders. We now operate 5 schools in Memphis with about 2,000 kids, and have opened a school in Birmingham, Alabama, because our new vision is to transform education across the South for children of color. And I am happy to be here and have known Kathryn for years.
Thank you, Roblin. So as we think about unpacking this complex process of developing a school facility project, maybe let's just start with some of the challenges and also the opportunities. I know, Kathryn, for you, with Facilities Investment Fund, or FIF, your core product is a 5-year construction loan. And so we've gone through a period of rising prices that have also affected construction inputs. How do you think about the projects and managing some of those increasing costs of those projects?
Yeah, I think the biggest barrier to projects is funding and costs. So as you've said, we've Just we've been in a high interest rate market, we've seen construction costs go up, it forces schools to have to do things like make tough choices about what they're going to do with their school, their forever home, and value engineer out things that might have been really important to their students. So I think one of the things that we do at Facilities Investment Fund at Civic Builders, and that I love to do, is to just be really flexible about our lending and think about how we can get the lowest cost capital to the schools. And we have a wonderful partnership with the Walton Family Foundation and a commercial lender that allows us to really have low cost financing. But we also try to be flexible in other ways. So really meeting the school with what they're telling us they need. So, they might get back to you and say, that origination fee can't work for us right now, but we can pay it later. Okay, fine. It's important to be flexible and to do what works for them. And the other thing I think that is can be a barrier, but can also be an opportunity, is access to experts. So reaching out and making sure you're all talking to the right people. Sometimes it can feel, when you're talking to your board and your parents about a new facility project, it feels overwhelming and like you're sort of just trying to figure it out. But there are people out there who will help you figure it out. And it's really important to reach out to them. Those are opportunities. There's funding in the market. It can be tricky to access the right funding for your project, but it's out there, and there are folks who will help you. One of the best things you can do is speak to your network of friends, school leaders, people in your community about, hey, how did you do your project? And they'll lead you to the next person and the next person. And people are happy to talk to you, even if they're not going to be your lender. So just make those calls.
Thanks, Kathryn. Kimberly, you've worked at large networks, and now you've started Believe Schools in 2020. Tell me about, how did you manage running a school, the operations, and then essentially have a whole other real estate development project? How do you balance those competing demands?
It's been difficult. In reflection earlier when I was preparing to speak today, it was almost like post-traumatic stress syndrome of all the things. When you're in a small charter network where you're the executive director, the chief of development, the chief of facilities as well, it is wearing a lot of different hats, and it has been a roller coaster ride. And so the first go around in Indiana, our local funder made it really easy, along with someone who may be on stage and worked at a different organization at the time, made our first facilities deal really easy. We didn't have to overthink anything, and I had a lot of resources. This time around, I'm not the new kid on the block anymore, and in our Missouri purchase, I've had to really learn commercial real estate and lending, and in addition to all of the other things. So it has been a bit of a challenge making sure I don't miss anything and understanding what an owner's rep does. And I've been grateful to have people who have helped us along the way. I appreciate Kathryn voicing over just having a village of people that I can reach out to. So when one of our lenders gave us a MOU that didn't look right, I was able to reach out to some folks and say, hey, this doesn't look right. I'm paying an upfront cost and a percentage. Does this make sense? And they were like, no, this isn't the right way. So I'm really grateful to have a village of folks to support me, but it has been a steep learning curve as I've opened and purchased buildings in 2 different states.
Amazing. Roblin, I guess you really can't talk about facilities and challenges without thinking about the inequity in funding for facilities, for charters. In your case, across your 2 states and your different projects, you've been able to manage some of these challenges and I think persevere. How have you been able to do that?
Very creatively, to say the least. Creatively, and I talk a lot about just relationships in general. So when we first started as an early charter school back in 2009, 2010, and we bought our first building, we had to find oftentimes traditional lenders or traditional banks don't necessarily understand the way charter schools work. They don't understand how our financing, how our funding comes through. So we had to partner basically with another nonprofit that recommended a local banker that actually understood the way charters worked, and he was able to provide our first loan and our first line of credit. And so we had to be creative and innovative of how to start. As we've gotten larger, of course, things have been easier, but a lot of that is banked on relationships. Kathryn was like one of our first lenders in her previous organization. And really building the relationship with her led me to further organizations that could fund us in the future. We were then connected, of course, later on to refinance our deals through EFF, but a large part of that was banked on the fact that we had a relationship with Kathryn. We were able to be financed for our initial buildings then, and we had built a reputation after that. So it is about understanding the numbers and understanding how it works, but a large part of it is about kind of following the breadcrumbs to the different organizations and partners that can help you.
I just want to double click the relationship piece. Someone that Kathryn trained at her old organization is now on our CMO board. And so we talk a lot about the village and people working with you. It is interesting how small the world is, and it's been invaluable to have the expertise of people who have been in the field. I know Kathryn said it. She hated to say how long she'd been in the field, but even her mentees are picking up the baton and helping finish the race for some of us, and really grateful for people who stay in the game in their seats.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of lenders out there, and folks are looking, you want to get a great rate because, as Nguyen was saying earlier, you want to bring those dollars back up so that you can use them for instruction and staffing and all those important things that you're doing at your school for your students. You don't want to spend all your money on paying your debt, or on your facility. But those relationships are so key because you might talk to someone who will say, oh, I know someone else over there. And I find that mission-aligned lenders, and there are a lot of them in the market, are really good partners for charter schools because it's about the relationship and the partnership, and they are mission aligned with you and making sure that you are protected and going to get that forever home.
Yeah, I really appreciate sort of the emphasis on the relationships. I know that a couple of years ago when we did a study at the foundation on owners reps who are third parties who are supposed to represent the school, the survey came back with 100 different parties, both for-profit, nonprofit, of varying expertise. I mean, it's a really challenging environment. And I think we'll get into this later, but I know in hearing your stories, you all have gone through different parties and sometimes it didn't work out. So I just want to, in thinking about relationships, sometimes it's not so clear cut. It's not, oh, I have a relationship. It's you've had to work through and find trusted partners, and sometimes it doesn't work out. And so I know it's been a real journey in trying to assemble that set of advisors and counselors, be it third parties or on the board, who can kind of support you through that process. Roblin, you mentioned a traditional lender, and maybe sometimes they don't know how charters operate or all the particulars. And I know in these real estate projects, we have talked about something called pre-development costs, which are some of the earliest stages of costs. So things like architect fees, engineering reports, surveys, environmental studies. And it is risky because a lot of times there isn't any collateral, there's insufficient cash flow, and so there's a lot of challenges there, but it's also that sort of point where, as school leaders, if we're talking about a path to a affordable facility, it's the on-ramp, right? It's addressing those costs and getting on that path. And so, Kathryn, I know with Facilities Investment Fund, in 2024, you all launched a new product called the FIF Pre-Development Fund, and I believe both school leaders here have been able to take advantage. So maybe, Kathryn, tell us about the product, the thinking behind it, and then if Kim and Roblin can kind of chime in with their experiences.
Yeah, sure. So pre-development funding is really, you're spending money before you start your construction. And you have to spend money on a lot of things before construction starts. You have to engage an architect to think through the feasibility of your plan. You have to bring in an attorney, super important, because you want them to review your contracts. If you are thinking about leasing space for a while, somebody needs to read through that lease to make sure you're well protected. That purchase and sales agreement, those MOUs, contracts you sign with, vendors, contractors. So that money is hard to find in the market because it's perceived as high-risk lending because your project isn't yet happening. And for those early stage schools, especially new start schools, they don't have revenue coming in yet. You haven't grown out your enrollment, your scaled enrollment to support debt. So our product is, and I'm really excited about the product, and it's funded from the Walton Family Foundation, which I really appreciate. But at Civic, we designed a product that you can have a maximum loan of $500,000, which is about the right size for new early stage schools to pay for an architect to get you to the point where you have a good set of plans. We mostly pay for architect, attorneys, some early environmental work to make sure that you're not buying a site that has a serious environmental problem. The loans are unsecured by real estate, and they have a very low interest rate. And we capitalize the interest, and what that means is you don't have to write a check every month to your lender for the interest. It's part of the loan. So the cost to you is not really, there's no cost almost. And you just have to use that money to get to your construction project. It's the hardest to find in the market, as we said before, but it's really important because it pays for you to have a good project team, good resources, get your project moving forward. And I think the other thing that's valuable about it in terms of attracting your later financing is other lenders, your traditional lenders or anyone else will see, oh, look, they're moving forward. And someone else has already assessed this project and decided to lend to it. So I think it's probably going to be okay. It shows other folks in the market that you have taken this risk, you've assessed it, and you feel like there's value in helping this school, and it attracts more capital into the market, which is good for the ecosystem for facility lending. You don't want to only have one lender in your market, you want to be able to have multiples that you can talk to.
For us, we were a beneficiary of this product, and for us, it was monumental. So we would not have been able to move forward. We were able to find a really great forever home and estate auction. And so we got it at a time where we were not ready at all to get it. And we had just launched this year in our St. Louis campus. And when Kathryn came through with that pre-development loan, it allowed us to pay the auction fees, just to pay a bunch of fees that I didn't even know were coming. And so getting it is what allowed us to feel comfortable moving forward with our forever home. And as Kathryn stated around attracting other folks, I do believe the nod from someone as well regarded in the space as Kathryn has allowed other folks to say, okay, we're greenlighting these folks. And so the dance that we do with lenders is a dance. And it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of time. And when you have someone who's invested in you and built a relationship with you and says, hey, this dance was worth it, and not only worth it for our relationship, but we're also going to make sure the doors open moving forward, it pays for itself tenfold. And our kids and families, especially in the communities that I serve, are not used to being able to walk into a state-of-the-art brand new facility, and our St. Louis school is going to be just that. And so for me, it's a dream come true. And so super grateful that Kathryn is able to provide that.
Happy to help you.
That was wonderful.
Yeah. And for us, we have not yet, but we should, because there's a ton of cash that we spent towards pre-development on the most recent project we had in Birmingham. So because we were an established network already in Memphis, but we were starting new in Birmingham, Alabama, we at least had some capital beforehand. We had established capital because we were an organization already for so many years. However, the amount of cash that we spent pre-development, prior to us closing on the loan, was significant and kept growing because Our project was supposed to, I think, happen over 3 months. It took us probably an additional 6 months maybe to close on the loan and to finalize the lease and to close on the loan.
This is for the construction loan.
This is for the construction
yes.
loan, yeah. And so, and because our attorney, when you talk about attorney's fees, the attorney's fees, I mean, were exorbitant because of the amount of time it took to get to closing. And so a pre-development loan would have made a lot more sense instead of us spending our cash. And we would definitely work to use that in the future.
Yeah, it's challenging if you, in Birmingham, we made the construction loan to Roblin's project. They are purchasing a site, leasing it first, and then purchasing it from the Archdiocese. And the Archdiocese
I would not recommend.
The Archdiocese.
Ask me later, I would not recommend, but
They are
we're here now.
They have facilities. They have surplus facilities nationally in your community, but they are challenging to negotiate leases with because they are under, there's many layers above them and there's not a lot of flexibility. So in that case, if you are going to try to get a parcel or a building from that's previously owned by the Archdiocese or owned by the Archdiocese, it is very, very good to bring an attorney early. Yes. Because those leases can be incredibly long and not super beneficial, but they'll negotiate. But you need someone to represent you.
They'll negotiate.
They'll negotiate.
We negotiated quotation marks.
We had an opportunity with the Archdiocese and we ran because.
Yeah.
I will say from a Walton Family Foundation perspective, we have funded charter facilities over the years, and our thinking has evolved as more lenders or funders have gotten comfortable in the space. We have tried to move into areas that are risky, and no doubt about it, this pre-development work before you have any collateral is definitely risky. And that's why traditional lenders aren't in the space, And so we've tried to really, put our sort of resources there in these ways with the pre-development fund, working with other groups to really support school leaders at that juncture where we think it's really important, just because there is, I don't want to call it a market failure, but traditional lenders just aren't meeting the demand. So these projects, we talk a lot about this risk and the uncertainty, and I guess you can't really talk about lending and facilities without thinking about how to lessen the risk of these projects. And Kim, I'm thinking about your experience. You've stressed the relationships, and I guess maybe we've talked about the game between the discussions with the different partners and sellers. You took advantage of a state auction. I know a lot of times these opportunities don't come in a timely manner. It's probably when you least expect it. So, how have you used your relationships or the skills on your teams or your own leadership to really try to manage that risk process and really try to get those projects across the finish line?
It's been a lot of hard decisions and a lot of trade-offs. And so because we're a small organization, I don't know how many people listening are from the big organizations where you've got a whole lot of back office support, or whether you're a small organization like ours where I have stated I have to wear a lot of hats. There are a lot of hard decisions that have to be made. So when we were talking earlier, we talked about transportation. So we're open access and open enrollment school, meaning we run transportation for our students. That means, as you mentioned earlier, about the $500,000 a year that you can save with the right facilities deal, we spend that easily in transportation year over year. And so that's an intentional decision that I make to make sure that we're being as equitable as possible and serving the students that need us the most. That trade-off on that decision means we don't have the capital to be able to have upfront costs to cover pre-development work or anything like that. It also means that we make the trade-off of 5 to 7 FTEs every year, whether at the school level or the CMO level, because we run transportation. So what I've had to do over the years as a leader is say, where are the other places that we can make cuts in order to make sure that we're providing adequate facilities for our students. And so we, in our Indianapolis campus, we bought a very cheap building, and it was cheaply made, and we've had floods every year in the building. and being able to navigate through facilities challenges in addition to the challenges of just running a good school have been, I can't even describe, indescribable, the stress that it brings. But the trade-off is we don't have a bunch of debt in regards to that facility. And so those are the types of decisions and trade-offs. It's allowed us to still run transportation, still make it through tough enrollment years. And so being in the seat that I'm in, I often am faced with making very difficult decisions that the trade-offs, as long as their values aligned, end up working out, but it is a tough road to navigate. And so to Robin's point, do not highly recommend, but I think it's worth it in the end, and our kids and our families are grateful for those tough decisions that we made.
It's pretty amazing just hearing about all the challenges that you have to deal with. I mean, when we were talking earlier, it's like that phone call that comes in that says that there's flooding, it's not going to some staff member, it's going to your cell phone. So, you know, it's like, you know, just trying to deal with all these things at once. Kathryn, I know the Facilities Investment Fund, it's actually a collaboration with Commercial Bank Capital, I think. In this round, it's PNC Bank and also the foundation. So, you know, public-private partnerships, and you've got to, you know, manage the underwriting and finding the schools, but you've got to manage your funders also. How have you gotten the bank, others at the foundation, comfortable with lending to early stage schools?
Yeah, sure. I mean, really through conversations, relationship, it just keeps coming back. But also, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years, so I have a lot of experience, but I've also lent in this market. So I think around 2017, I really saw a gap in the charter school lending space, which was lending to new start schools and those schools that were between 1 to 3 years of operating history, because they're perceived as higher risk. You know, like we said before, they're growing their enrollment, they haven't proven out their growth and their proficiency, you know, numbers, and so most lenders want to wait for that. But this is when schools need help in the beginning. That's the most critical period for them. So I spent about a year talking to folks nationally, consultants, charter school leaders, you know, people who have become your friends, ed champions in all the different states, funders, anyone I could think of who had worked in this space. And basically I just asked them, what is it that you see when you work with new and young schools that makes it work? Like, what's the secret sauce? And I had lots of wonderful conversations, and I basically synthesized it down to 6 things that if they, and this is not about the real estate project, it's really about the school. 6 things that if they were there, you know, that was a critical mass of things that would help propel the school to success. And it was, the first one was leadership and governance. The second one is your academic model, how it was developed, what it's based on. The third one is your financial projections. You know, how are you thinking about your modeling, where PPR is going. The fourth one is the all-important recruitment, outreach, enrollment. Like, how are you thinking about doing that, especially if you're going, like these two did, to a new community. The fifth one is your market. Why did you choose this market? What does it mean to you? What's the vision? What's the mission behind going there? What does the market look like when it comes to the political climate, the funding climate, the authorizer? These are all really important conversations that you need to have early about why you're going into this market, so your eyes are wide open and you're forging partnerships. And the last one, which to me, I mean, they're all really important, but the last one is, to me, the most important, is that it's a community-centered school. There's mission in the school for being there. And to me, you know, that really means that you're an anchor in that community. Those schools are really important to parents, to small businesses, to the ecosystem in that neighborhood, and that is really important to me. So those 6 things I've found, and I've been making a lot of year zero, as I call them, in early stage school loans since probably 2018. And yeah, you know, things are gonna happen. There's gonna be times when things don't work out the way you want them to, and you're gonna get that, you know, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I'll get a call well after work. I mean, like sometimes late to tell me that something has happened, but I want those calls because I want to be a support. I'm a partner, and I don't want my school leaders to think they're doing this by themselves. You know, we're going to get through all this stuff together, and it's valuable to have that relationship. But it's worked, and I think in 2015, Alabama authorized their charter law, and I was the first lender to go into Alabama because there was no one lending there really, no mission-aligned nonprofit lenders, and have made a lot of loans in Alabama since then, and it works. I mean, the model works.
Thanks, Kathryn. Roblin, I know with Freedom Prep and across the different states and your projects, it seems like you've had the success not only finding the on-ramp and getting that construction financing, but also being able to, get to that permanent financing. For me, these facilities are long-lived assets, 30 to 40 years, and so it really is, that sort of time horizon that you're looking at, and get moving through each of those steps. So I'm just curious for you, how have you been able to make those transitions? I mean, moving from one financing to the next really is a set of decision points and decision making. Tell us more about how you were able to achieve that.
Yep. A lot of it, I would say, through trusted advisors, to say the least. So in Memphis, we had 5 schools in 4 buildings, and we'd purchased all 4 buildings, but then we got to a point where we needed to refinance through a bond deal through EFF. We probably spent at least 2 years trying to get that deal to go through. Part of the reason why the deal wouldn't go through and EFF would not loan or would not refinance for us initially was because they said that I needed a stronger board. Kathryn talked about governance. I needed a stronger finance committee, and then I also needed a different CFO. I am a person that tell me the truth. Immediately, I knew to an extent already, but hearing it from the lender confirmed that, okay, I've got to solidify our financial foundation prior to them taking this risk. And so part of it is through those trusted advisors, we were able to refinance and get a bond deal through that matter as well. When I also talk about trusted advisors, I think about folks on my board. And so I had no idea. To this day, I still don't know if I could explain to you how the bond deal worked, but I would say that I had a board member who retired he was an investment banker and did bonds on Wall Street back in the day. And so I had a board member that was a trusted advisor that helped kind of shield us through there, and I was able to find a really strong CFO and build that finance committee so that EFF would be comfortable taking the risk. And then when we move forward, the challenges become different challenges in terms of facilities funding. So because we opened in Birmingham, and it was a new state, and we were considered basically new organization, despite us having 15 years of experience in Memphis, we had to figure out a way to get a construction loan being a new organization. We were fortunate because we had received a significant amount of funding from Mackenzie Scott a few years prior that we had not touched. And so we were able to use that as collateral, as a loan, basically guarantee for this loan. But we were in that position because we were able to leverage our funding as a larger organization to be able to do that. We will hopefully refinance that as well too. But we were able to basically leverage just our historical work, the foundation that I've built in terms of my finance committee and staffing, and then relationships. Continuing to have the relationship with Kathryn, continue to have the relationship with EFF has helped significantly along the way for facilities. And yet, it's still a challenge. So it's still, despite having the relationships, despite having the history, it continues to be a challenge to find and afford facilities. We have not, despite nearly having 20 years of experience operating charter schools, I've never been able to do a ground up charter school. As much as my kids deserve it, serve the kids that need it the most, I've never been able to afford to do a ground up charter school because, again, like Kimberly said, we've got to put our money into where the kids need it versus into the facility.
I just want to double click that, and that's been my biggest challenge because I have colleagues in other cities who have beautiful, brand new, ground up build facilities, and we're retrofitting doing much smaller. I actually have a colleague in one of the cities I'm in that just did a $25 million construction project. He might be 27. He looks a little different than me. He's a lighter hue. And it's been very difficult to understand the equity in that, and that has been a struggle for me. The other thing that Roblin said that has made a lot of sense, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, is the going to a different state. And so I'm moving from a state with less per pupil funding, less funding around transportation, zero funding around facilities, and I'm moving to a state that has at least $5,000 more in per pupil funding. They reimburse for transportation, and I'm still treated as if I'm a new start, fresh start, and have no experience. And I'm similar to Rob. I don't have Roblin's experience, all due respect. I'm on princess level, she's on queen level. We did not get wifey money.
I'm just old.
We stand on the shoulders of the giants, but we also have done good work. And so it's really frustrating that when you do good work and you get good results, how difficult it is sometimes to do the dance. And so I've listened to Roblin speak today, and I'm mentally taking notes around stay in the game, stay on the dance floor, keep dancing. And so I'm grateful that she's sharing her wisdom, because from my seat, it's been hard to keep dancing when I recognize and when I go into the $25 million buildings, and I'm like, why can't my kids have this? In the $25 million buildings of schools that don't offer transportation. And it's like, hey, my kids deserve the same thing. And so that has been challenging for me, but I'm grateful to know that I just need to stay on the dance floor, keep the waltz going, and it'll all work out.
The replication conversation is very interesting because, as we said before, we get a large amount of our funding from a traditional bank. And when we made a loan to Freedom Prep for construction, it was a real conversation about trying to convince them that, yeah, it's a replication, but it's based on a really strong model with a really strong leader, an excellent back office program, and someone who has been researching this market for 2 years, 3 years?
At least.
A long time. Like, we've been talking about that market for a long time. But it's just the perception, like it's risk because it's a new ecosystem. Well, it is, but if you listen to all the things that have happened, like you were saying, then that risk is mitigated. And I think for lenders and funders, we need to be more flexible and more open about how we can support these schools, and just think a little bit outside the box about what's really happening and how you can still be successful in the market as a lender with replication or with New Start.
But I would say, to the lender's credit, the risk is real.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Alabama was far more challenging than we could have ever anticipated. And I think the trust that you have is that we could figure it out, which we did, but we had challenges. We've had challenges with enrollment that we didn't anticipate. We've had challenges with zoning that we didn't anticipate. So despite operating for 15 years prior to this time, there were new challenges that showed up that were much harder to climb over. But because of the experience, we were able to figure it out. But I mean, the risks were absolutely there for sure.
But I've been watching you navigate those risks since 2018 in your market and now in new markets because of your commitment to mission. I mean, and that's really, that's why we're supporting you, because of your commitment to mission.
It's super complex. I think in the bio, it might mention that I sit on the loan committees for both Facilities Investment Fund and Roblin. When you say EFF, that refers to Equitable Facilities Fund. And it's an evolution in sort of the thinking and the approval process. I mean, a lot of what you said, Kim, is really resonating with me, just that bootstrapping that you have to do as a startup and how we can really meet you given the challenges that you're facing. I know one thing that we've been able to do is, I think historically a lot of the underwriting has been on financials, right? And we've tried to, move that to things like, academics, and then also, a review of enrollment and enrollment plans. And then from there, we're going to, things like, operating history and trying to get folks comfortable with that. It is true with our programs, it's no longer pure philanthropy. A lot of times we're bringing in other funders. And so, we are underwriting towards getting repaid. And so it's a work in progress. I mean, it's been evolving, but I appreciate these stories and sort of these challenges. Like you said, the risk is really inherent. It's there in these projects. On one hand, it's kind of simple. You can talk about the school and enrollment and things like that, but all the projects have their own nuance and particulars about the state and per pupil and other things like that. I did want to take the time in both of your stories. You mentioned we've talked about relationships and trusted advisors. Roblin, you talked about, having to find, a new CFO, a new finance committee on your board. Kim, I know you talked about having to work with a new owner's rep, right, in our story. So, I mean, again, I'm just thinking about sort of your own courage and leadership. And basically, like you're hearing these lenders or third parties make these suggestions, and I guess you're having to go with your gut feel. But can you talk through that actual process when, you're having to work with different people and sometimes the relationships don't work? And again, fast-moving process, you're not real estate developers, the auction's coming up. Like, just tell us more. I'm just so, curious and, so fascinated by that process and, so in awe of what you've been through.
I've had to ask a lot of questions, and sometimes those questions are well received, and sometimes they're not. And so we've worked with some large nationally facing consultants, some local consultants. When we did our first deal in Indianapolis, a local consultant tried to take us immediately to the bond market, and they were looking at 8 to 10% on the loan, and that just didn't feel right. I just purchased a home, and I'm like, these rates just seem super high. This can't make sense. And so through some of the relationships that I had with some of our national funders, I was introduced to Blue Hub, and that's how I originally met Kathryn. And we were able to get a deal that has allowed us to build a strong school and a strong foundation. I don't know that we would have been able to build the same deal had we gone directly to the bond market at that point in time of history and where we were on the financial side. And so I'm grateful that I asked those extra questions, even though the people that I was supposed to just blindly trust were gonna lead me down the wrong road. Me being a little bit skeptical and inquisitive has saved our organization a ton of money. And so really grateful for that. Fast forward in this new deal that we're dealing with in Missouri, doing the dance and continuing to do the dance with some of the national lenders. I believe, I'm already speaking it into existence, is gonna pay off tenfold and allow us to move into our forever home and allow our students to have the facilities that they deserve. And so I'm listening to the wisdom of just take your time, and even if it doesn't happen as quickly as you'd like, it's gonna happen. But we've also had to change representatives because we've had to say, hey, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't sound right. And sometimes in some of those conversations, I've gotten pushback. As a school leader and as a Black woman in education, people are like, you don't know anything about commercial real estate. People have said things and I'm like, nah, listen, I'm sticking with my gut here. And so what I would advise anybody is always follow your gut because it's not gonna lead you wrong. If something doesn't feel right, if there's smoke, there's fire. Follow that because it has saved our organization a ton of money. Do not blindly trust. Even if they are people that we're supposed to be able to blindly trust, go with the people who have built the long-standing relationships with you, who you know or have looked out for your best interests. And we've been grateful to have people in the space to do that. And if you don't, reach out, because there are good people, lots of good people in the space who want to do right by kids.
And I would reiterate that, particularly asking questions and asking multiple different people the same question. Because what I find is, and we also had to change owners reps at one point, but what I found was that I felt like that owners rep, when they were representing newer charter schools and folks that had not done this before, those new charter schools didn't know what questions to ask.
Yes.
So you don't even necessarily know what to ask to get the answer that you need. So you have to ask multiple people. It's interesting, I tell a story. I just received a message on LinkedIn recently from one of my former babies, one of my kids that graduated in 2017, and he's trying to start his own charter school in Arizona. And so he asked, could we have a phone call? And I said, sure, let's talk about it. And so he starts talking about trying to purchase like a $20 million facility. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I don't even know where to start. I'm like, I don't know that this is something you want to start out doing, but my question to him was, who do you have on your board? Who are the people that you're talking to? It's just so important to have multiple different people from different areas to be advisors, particularly when you're doing this work. Not necessarily experts in every single area, but all over. Hopefully he uses me as an advisor as he goes through this, but I suggested make sure you've got someone that does facilities, that does real estate on your board, that understands that this may not be a good deal. I told him there are a lot of loan sharks out there for charter schools. There are a lot of for-profit organizations that will loan you $30 million for a building, and then you end up never being able to pay them back for that facility. And so it's super important, one, talking to the right people, but also talking to multiple people and talking to people that have done this before. So that I always want folks to not have to make the same mistakes that I did. And so I'm always open to talking to people that are new in this game to give them advice on how to move forward.
Roblin, you need to have that young man call me.
I am, because that scared me when he said
experience in Arizona. Yeah.
But so many of our younger leaders are seeing the shiny new thing. And it's easy to get enticed by the shiny new thing. And I'm seeing that over and over. And unfortunately, in a few years, once you get that shiny new thing, you can't keep it. And so that would be the other just quick advice I would give is don't get too overly excited about the shiny new thing if it's not in the bank.
And a shiny building doesn't always equal results.
It does not.
We've had phenomenal results, and we have had some raggedy buildings.
Same.
So,
with water coming from the ceiling.
yeah.
We don't even want to mention how much deferred maintenance Memphis has on their school buildings right now.
Yes.
Super powerful stories. Looking at time, maybe we'll move to question and answer from the audience. If folks have questions for the panelists, we'd love to respond.
Hi. Thank you so much. This was such an interesting panel. My question is for Kimberly. So when you took the step from being an educator to a founder, what in your mindset stayed the same and what changed and what did you have to learn?
The village concept stayed the same. So even as a school leader, I believed heavily in having a village of good people around me, and that saved me time and time again as a school leader, and it has saved me time and time again as a founder and as an executive director. So you've heard us talk about relationships from a mindset perspective. What's had to change is my political acumen. As a school leader, I was able to say what I wanted when I wanted and didn't care what people thought about it. And in the seat I sit in now, I have to be much more conscious of the long-term impacts of my words, and I have to be in my actions and whether I show up at this thing or not show up at this thing. So really navigating the political scene for me has been a learning curve because I've been used to being able to just be in my building with my kids, with my staff, all of which I hired, and now I'm on a much bigger stage, for lack of better words. And that stage means that every word matters, every comment matters, and that's a heavy weight and a heavy bag to carry. And so that's been a challenge as I've had to navigate through that. And I've not always done it well. So it's been a learning curve.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here on the panel today. I've gained lots of insights. My first question, I guess, is for Roblin and also for you, Kimberly. What made you take the leap of faith to start a charter school? So I'm also a non-traditional attorney, worked in education, but thinking about starting one. And so I'm just curious, what made you take that leap of faith to start one? And then also I'm interested in how did you assemble your initial team of advisors, supporters, and then your staff?
Yep. Okay. Faith. I don't know if it was faith. The leap of faith. So my passion has always been civil rights. I actually went to law school because I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. Then I realized that education was really the path to working to equal the playing field. Practiced law, hated practicing law, and then interestingly enough, I coached a mock trial team at a high school. Fell in love with the kids, and this is in Memphis. Kids fell in love with me, but then when I realized that they wanted to go to law school, they wanted to be attorneys just like me, but their test scores were too low to get them into universities, even though they believed their ACT scores were too low, but their state test scores were fine. We were fooling kids, particularly kids that look like me, black and brown children, to believe that they were ready. I felt like I needed to do more then. I did not want to run a school. I did not want to be a school leader. I worked for New Leaders for New Schools, and I saw what principals went through. But then a friend sent me an email about building excellent schools and said, this looks like something you should do. I applied, and the universe will force you to be where you're supposed to be. Amen. So I believe this has been my life. This was supposed to be my life's work, despite not me wanting to do it, and particularly because of civil rights. So my thing is to ensure that kids that look like me have the same opportunities in life that I've had, and through a proper education. We're seeing that even now people are losing jobs left and right, but the people that tend to be able to bounce back are folks that have a college degree and are able to kind of leverage that. And so long story short, it's really civil rights is what transitioned me into being an educator, and I haven't looked back since. Mm-hmm.
Mine is similar, except I knew that I wanted to lead after working under some bad leaders. And so I had worked in some traditional and charter schools where we were running schools that we wouldn't send our own kids to. And so that did not feel good. So at some point I recognized that it was time for me to develop something that I would feel confident. I didn't have children at the time, and I didn't want to have kids and run a school that I didn't feel comfortable sending my own child to. So that was what pushed me over the edge to say, let me quit this job and take the leap of faith to launch something new.
When I first met you, you told an amazing story about how you wanted to you were opening your school in Indianapolis, and how eventually you wanted to get into St. Louis because that was where you were from.
Coming home.
And that you had been in a school environment that was so poor, and that you had been successful in your life, but that you realized that there were people that had been left behind. Mm-hmm. And that story still resonates with me today about like how much that impacted me and made me really want to help you get into St. Louis, because just like going back to your community, like why you get into it, like that part of your story is so important, just for you personally and for your school, but also when you're out in the community trying to, bring in folks to support you, understanding the why, the vision, like why this neighborhood, why this school. It is a good story to be able to tell, and that was so important to me.
And our forever home of our St. Louis school, our forever home is a mile from where I grew up, 2 miles from the Pruitt-Igoe housing project that my father grew up in, and a mile from the high school I taught in when I was a TFA corps member. And so it is truly a full circle coming home moment. And so when we found this building on state auction, it absolutely was the universe putting us where we needed to be. And so just definitely grateful for all the stars aligning in that.
Wonderful.
Thank you for remembering
No,
that.
I'll never forget that story.
I think we'll move on to maybe our closing, and if each of the panelists can give us a takeaway or a lesson learned, whatever you'd like. Maybe Kathryn, we'll start with you.
Sure. I would say to folks in the audience from schools, like everyone, like we have sort of a theme that's consistent. Ask questions, build your relationships. It takes a village. Like, you're not in it alone. Reach out to people, and when those people say, call this person or that person, call them. They love to talk to you. I love to get phone calls. I might not lend to you, you might not need my money, but I'm happy to tell you what I know and what might be helpful to you. And then for folks that are funders or lenders in the office, in the auditorium, I would say, be open, be flexible, listen to your schools, to what they need, and be willing to adapt a little bit. Yes, I want to get repaid. I mean, it's debt. I need to get repaid. But I can be as flexible as I can be. And that's so important to schools, especially young and new schools that are just starting out. We need to support them.
I know you've been a huge advocate for flexibility, so.
I know, but you all have been really supportive too, because our pre-development fund, it's amazing. It's solving huge problems in the market. It's really been great, and it's been really well received because it's available to schools that are new start schools. You have a CSP grant. That doesn't pay for all the things you need to pay for with facility.
It does not.
It does not. So having this kind of money in the market really makes a big difference.
Thanks,
So
Kathryn.
thank you.
Roblin?
Just relationships again. Relationships are super important. Kimberly talked about how you had to shift from being a school leader to being a leader, and the politics and the games that you have to play the game. I didn't want to play the game either, but the game leads to great things for your kids. And it's just so important. You think early on in your career, I'm just going to put my head down, I'm going to do the work, I'm going to do good work. That is true, and you should. And you have to build the relationships. You have to talk to different people, and you have to play the game to be able to get what you need ultimately for your kids. And you just never know where relationships lead you, and where it's almost like breadcrumbs. You speak with Kathryn, then you met Nguyen, and then I've met different people through EFF. You never know where it's going to lead you, but it's almost, relationships tend to be further along in your career. Relationships tend to be more important than actually even knowing and doing the technical work. And so relationships, and continue to play and make those relationships to get what you need for your kids.
Yeah, and I'm seeing this picture of myself staring at me, and I would say if anybody wants to talk tomorrow morning, or really any time, I am not a fancy QR code person, but there is a QR code, and I think it'll take you somewhere where you can find me, and I would be happy to talk to you. I know Roblin and Kim are happy to talk to you, so find us, and maybe we can help you think about getting into your forever home.
My quick advice would be take the risk. My latest crusade, not that I wasn't busy enough, is I recently became a foster mom. And a lot of people, I waited a long time in my career to have a family because I dedicated my life to other people's children and spent the majority of my adult life serving other people's children. And I'm still serving other people's children, but in a different way in my own home as a new foster mom. So anybody who has the facilities to have an extra child in your house, definitely look into it. But take the risk and do the thing. So don't let any barrier that you have in front of you keep you from launching the school, doing what you think is next, investing in the early stage entity. Take the risk is my headline, because most of the time I feel like it will be well worth it. I know a lot of people have anxiety about all of the things that come along with that, but it'll be well worth it in the end. Life starts at the end of your comfort zone, step out of it. And so take the risk, take the risk, take the risk.
Awesome. I think a few things from my point of view on the topic of relationships. As you're dealing with these third parties who are advisors, or maybe you're engaging them, you've really got to be super clear on, what they're doing and what they're not. Almost to the point of please write out the scope of work. I want to be entirely clear. There shouldn't be any muddle of maybe they're doing that, maybe they're not, because if they're not doing it, you have to find someone who does do it. I'll also say that, if you're an early stage school, from a lender's perspective, we're always going to glance at the governance because we don't have the operating history. So we do want to know some of the people that you have as part of your team on the bench, supporting you, giving you different feedback on these complex issues. And then the last thing from being on loan committee is, you know, when you deliver that package to the lender, if you can just have that paragraph on the ways you're kind of being, the efforts you've made to tie back into the community in whatever form or fashion, the efforts you've made, it really helps us sort of form that complete picture. And again, I'm coming from this mindset of like, let's get to the yes, but you know, as you're in the data, but sometimes we just need that sort of holistic statement on this is what we're doing for the community, this is what we're seeing, and it's super helpful at the end of the day. Okay, right on time. Well,
All right.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Guys.